Uh, Emor begins with a directive to Aharon, to Aaron HaKohen, the high priest, as to what the responsibilities of the Kohen include. And part of that is the Kohen being on a very high spiritual level, that much is expected of the Kohen to maintain that spiritual level. The inability for a Kohen to come into contact with the dead, the idea of the dead represents a type of impurity, which is the very antithesis of the Kohen's role in bringing people close to God. As we've noted, not because death is dirty or the like, but the idea of holiness is getting close to God is accomplished in life. And when a person dies, they lose that ability to get close to God physically. The Kohen represents the people's spiritual quest. And to do so, you have to maintain a certain exalted spiritual state, which precludes coming into contact with the antithesis of this. And at the same time, the Kohen, because of this, becomes a kind of spiritual hero, a spiritual role model. In some respects, the Kohen is meant to represent a certain more perfect, the idea that the superheroes, are always seem to be tall and well built and attractive looking. In a sense, the Kohen also is represented as that way. The Torah describes certain physical deformities that disqualified a Kohen from serving as a Kohen. And these were things that would be noticeable. They talk about different missing limbs and other different deformities that people would notice while the Kohen is working, that would distract people from paying attention to the Kohen, paying attention to the work of the Kohen. There's a lesser known blessing of that's not generally said because it's hard to identify when to say, of Mishana Habriot, of God who makes things different in nature. Maybe it could be described as kind of the elephant man blessing. When you see something in nature which is very different, then you recognize that God creates, and God also can deviate from the standard order and nature of creation. And so in a similar respect, when the Kohen would possess a certain type of physical deformity or difference that would draw people's attention away from what the Kohen was doing, there was senses that that makes it hard for the Kohen to operate in an effective fashion as an intermediary or as a spiritual representative. But I guess I would imagine maybe being too good looking would also be a deformity. I don't know. It depends. Beauty is obviously subjective. But there's a certain ideal, a spiritual ideal that the Kohen represents, and in a way, and this is a theme that we see in the Mefarshim, the idea that the Kohen does represent something that it's not only about the action of what can be accomplished, right? A Kohen is a Kohen because a Kohen's father is a Kohen, and grandfather is a Kohen, right? That's the punchline of the famous joke of the person who wanted to be a Kohen and was willing to pay $1 million for it. And the rabbi asked him why. He said, well, my father's a Kohen, my grandfather was a Kohen, I want to be a Kohen too. Right? The guy didn't know what he was talking about because obviously hereditary line, he gets to be a Kohen. But on some level, some things in Judaism are out of our control. They just happen, right? Someone who's born a Jew is always a Jew. If someone's born not a Jew, they're not a Jew unless they transform via conversion. There's just certain things in general. The Kohen represents a certain essential concept within religion that this is how it is. And the Kohen represents that, and the Kohen's activities, and even the Kohen's comportment, the Kohen's behavior, the Kohen's clothes. If the Kohen's not dressed appropriately, he's not a Kohen. And because the Kohen represents a certain rule of law, a certain mindset, a certain soul set of this is how God intends it. And God has called upon this group of individuals, the descendants of Aaron, to be our representatives and to, in a sense, to create a certain environment and a certain impact on the people. I think that, for many synagogue attendees, Birkat Kohanim, the blessing of the Kohanim, creates a certain environment that is spiritually uplifting. Similarly in Israel at the Kotel on intermediate days of Sukkot and Pesach, there's that mass gathering. And you see a little bit there too. It begins with the fact that it's an opportunity for a certain spiritual ideal and aspiration to be presented. Kohanim have their role to bless the people want to be blessed. That's where it starts. But look what it's turned into. It's turned into an event that attracts tens of thousands of people. Obviously, these past years, COVID has impacted it. Last year significantly. This year it started to open up, and I'm sure we'll be back to normal by the fall. But there too, we see that there is a certain seeking and striving and overflow of connection that exists at these moments where people feel that they're getting in touch with spiritual greatness. Some would say the Kotel has that effect on people in general, but from a mass perspective, the Birkat Kohanim draws those people in. I think there's something similar that we're seeing with regards to with Meron. There's something about these genuine moments of spirituality, of feeling of nearness, of closeness to God that attracts people and engages people, and the Torah recognizes that in the role of the Kohen. It comes with certain benefits, a certain reverence that is shown to the Kohen, certain rules and method of treatment. Alas, our Kohanim today may not necessarily be able to prove that they're Kohanim. No offense to any Kohanim here, but that's just the way it works. The Rambam talks about that we can assume that they're a Kohen because their father and grandfather and family tradition is, but they're not necessarily what's called miyuchasim. They're not necessarily absolutely, Kohen proven. You can't put the sticker, 100% pure necessarily on them. But there's still this type of attitude, behavior by and behavior towards the Kohen as representing this type of religious spiritual ideal. And it does, for those who are spiritually sensitive, have a major impact and draw people towards it. At the same time, when it comes to the Kohen, that some of it is imposed upon the Kohen, imposed upon us by the way the Kohen is meant, the role the Kohen plays for us. But it is interesting to note that when it comes to describing why the Kohen is holy, the Torah says v'kidashto, you have to treat the Kohen as holy, and this is part of the source of the responsibility of respecting the Kohen. They talk about the Kohen getting to go first in line, the Kohen getting the first aliyah, the Kohen leading the Birkat Hamazon benching, right? So you have to sanctify, but why? For all the things that the Kohen represents, son of Aaron, God's chosen, wearing the clothing, bringing the sacrifices, right? Which one does the Torah settle upon? Ki es lechem elokecha hu makriv. This is in Vayikra 21:8. You treat the Kohen as holy because they're the ones offering the food of God. Kadosh yelach ki kadosh ani Hashem b'kadoshchem. They're holy to you. I'm the Lord who sanctify you, and I am holy. Why do we revere the Kohen? Because the Kohen is engaged in holy activity. At the end of all of the things that we don't understand about the Kohen and about what this Kohen represents as a spiritual ideal, and it's hereditary, and you can't join the team, and so all the pieces that make it exclusive, that make Kahuna exclusive. At the end of the day, why are we treating the Kohen as holy? What is it that tips the balance? Because the Kohen does God's work. The Kohen's involved in action. And in many ways, it's not enough for the Kohen to just be this very well-dressed, well-behaving, solemn, dignified, spiritual superhero role model. But the Kohen actually has to get their hands dirty and do the work. And that's at the heart of the source of reverence. And so, it's not always enough for the spiritual experience to be drawing in those who wish to watch it and see it and be there, but it also requires the action. Now, I would say at the same time, there's some people who love Lag BaOmer and some people who hate Lag BaOmer. I think that you can be drawn to the spiritual experience, but it's not enough if it's only curiosity. And you can hate the seemingly waste of times of Lag BaOmer, but as long as one still maintains a certain degree of spirituality and soul. As we have mentioned, it always comes down to that divide between the law and the spirit. Right? Lag BaOmer is a very spirited day, but if it turns into a day that is commemorating a certain springtime, in the history of the Jewish people, the way this more secular Zionist community adopted in its days, the bows and arrows or the outside days, right? That's okay, but it can't only be about that, and it can't only be about being present when the fire is burnt and listening to the music if it doesn't also come with the lessons and the teachings and the behavior of religious behavior of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. So as with everything, there's a duality that's there, but that duality, Lag BaOmer, it starts with the soul. It starts with the spark that is meant to draw people towards the flame, towards the fires, and elevate them and uplift them. And like the Kohen who is uplifted, uplift them towards service, towards action, towards connection, and that is very much a legacy of Lag BaOmer. That's very much on our minds for those who get so excited by Lag BaOmer. And even if we're not that excited by Lag BaOmer in general, now we have certain insight into the spiritual grandeur that is beneath the surface that sprung forth to create this day. And I think it's similar to the roots of the soul of the holiness of the Kohen, that in both examples, it's not just about the individual Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai or the people who are the descendants of Aaron the Kohen, provide us a certain guide to a healthy spiritual, intellectual, religious worldview. And our sages over time decided that Lag BaOmer was a day to put this moment on the calendar, and to put this activity on the calendar, to put this commemoration on the calendar, which gives us a chance each year to explore it, especially as we transition from Pesach to Shavuot. And a couple more stops on that chain as we get to Yom Yerushalayim and then Rosh Chodesh Sivan and the days leading into Shavuos. But for now, on this Lag BaOmer, of course, tinged with the sadness of what happened in Meron, we are, enlightened, both intellectually and spiritually, by what the day represents. And in this week with Parshas Emor, seeing that also modeled by the Kohanim.